One of the many exciting things that happened last weekend at Pro Tour Amsterdam was the keynote speech given by none other than Brian Gottlieb, and one of the things that he revealed within those are spoiler cards that came from Rosetta, and that includes these split cards. Split cards, an exciting new addition to Flesh and Blood that we didn't quite know how they functioned. We see that there are two essentially cards kind of mashed up into one, but we didn't know how this actually plays out, and he made the comment, hey, you're gonna have to wait for the rules reprise on this one that Josh Scott is gonna put together to make sense of this. I'm not gonna give it to you all the way, and wouldn't you know it, we have that now. So I've read through it. I'm going to break it down for you so you can understand how these new cards are going to function, how you can interact with them, and what these heroes might be able to do both in a limited sense or in a classic constructed sense. So what is a split card? Also shout out, by the way, to the wonderful Fabrary website for putting these in a format that you don't have to do this for, because that would be uncomfortable. A split card is a singular entity. It is a singular card that you register as one card. So Comet Storm / Shock, in this case, as you see on the screen, is one card. It's not two separate cards. They don't count towards your deck limit, and doubly, if you will. It just counts once. Okay, this card is a card that you draw like you would any other card, and you play down, paying its costs as you would any other card. But when you play it, you decide which of these two effects, or both, if you're using the Meld keyword, which of these two effects you want to activate, and then you verbally declare that to your opponent. So for example, as you can see on the left side, we have Comet Storm. Comet Storm costs 2. As you can see at the top right, this cost applies to either of these sides. Comet Storm blocks 3. This block value applies to either of these sides. That's unique and important to note here in a moment. And it also is a wizard action, which means you need an action point to be able to play this, unless you've of course played something that gives you the ability to play actions at instant speed, which wizards are known to do. If you choose to play Comet Storm, it will cost you 2. You have to pay 2, and then you will deal 5 arcane damage, paying the action point as well to any target. You could also choose, or I should say you can instead choose to resolve the shock side of this. The shock side also costs 2 by itself. You have to pay 2 to activate this. It can block for 3. Just the entirety of the card can block for 3. And it says deal 1 arcane damage to any target lightning instant. So you can do this at instant speed, so you do not need the action point. So this card can function in 2 dual roles, 2 separate roles. It could be an action speed 2 cost 5 arcane damage spell, or it could be an instant speed 2 cost 1 arcane damage spell. Or you could do both via the Meld keyword, which says Meld. You may play one or both halves of this card. Each half costs 2. So if you would like to play this card and activate both effects, you will pay 2 for this effect and 2 for this effect, meaning that you can play this card and meld the effects together and pay 4, which is a big cost. But what does it do? It deals 1 arcane damage and then 5 arcane damage to any target in that order. So there's a couple of question marks that come up along with this type of card, and I want to kind of go through them with you, that they are broken down. I could explain them, but I think they do a great job of explaining them in the article. I won't read it word for word, but I will point you to a couple of them. First things first, they break down the idea that some of these cards are talented, like halves of these cards are talented, and the other half of these cards are class-based. Like we see here, Comet Storm Shock is both wizard, which is the class, so both Verdance and Acilio are wizards, but the other half is a lightning talent, meaning that you can't put this card into Verdance because she is not a lightning accessible wizard. She is an elemental wizard that can access Earth, not lightning. Therefore, this card can only be played by Acilio because he's the only one that has access to lightning and is also a wizard. So same thing goes if you're playing like the Runeblade and Earth card, which you see right here. You can only play the Earth Runeblade card if you are playing as Florian instead of as Aurora. They break down the Meld effect here as well, and there's a couple of things within this that, as we go through this, that we really want to touch on. And it happens to come up right here. And this is interesting because I actually expected it to kind of be the other way around, or that you would get to choose. But when you choose to play both of these effects, when you choose to meld the cards after playing a melded split card, you will create a single layer on the stack. So when you play the card, there's a single layer for your opponent to respond to. Okay, if you choose both, it's still a single layer. Now, the weird thing about this is you're going to have that single layer. Let's just take this card. You're going to have that single layer, but it's going to resolve twice. Meaning that you are going to start with, if you've paid for both of these effects, I'll just put this screen on. If you pay for both of these effects, you need to resolve this layer and do the thing twice. And they specify that the order that you do it in is right to left, which is kind of smart because every time that they've created one of these, or shown us one of these split cards, I should say, the instant side is on the right and the action side is on the left. But if you're melding this together, then you are playing this right to left. So the shock in this case version is going to activate first. It is a single layer and you're going to activate the shock. Okay. And then your opponent, goes and resolves damage and chooses to pay or not pay. After they've either responded to that first layer of the shock side of things or allowed it to resolve and then, paid around the arcane damage, you'll go back to the layer and you'll resolve the Comet Storm side of things. And your opponent has a chance to respond to it and you have a chance to respond to it as well, which means if there's some sort of effect that, I don't know, amplifies damage and you don't want it to fall on the shock side to make it go from 1 to 2, but you want it to go on the Comet Storm side to make it go from 5 to 6, you can still respond to this half of the layer, if you will, to do so. So what that would look like would be play this card for 4 resources, activate and then resolve the shock side, move past that, go to Comet Storm, and in response to the Comet Storm resolution, in response to that layer, you play your amp effect. And in that case, you could play, I don't know, let's just throw Kindle, right? You can play Kindle. Oh, I actually have it already in there. Boom. You play Kindle, it will amp 1, and it could maybe even net you a card. But nevertheless, it's going to activate here, pushing it from 5 to 6. So that is one thing that you can do with this. And both players have the chance to respond. So for example, if your opponent takes the 1 damage here and then responds to the 5 arcane damage with Oasis Respite. Makes sense? That is something that they could do, which is very important to note. When they first showed these off, I actually thought you were going to be able to choose your layers. Like these would be basically like 2 layers and you would just choose which one would activate first. Instead, it's always right to left and it's 1 singular layer and it's 2 visits to that layer, if you will. That's kind of how they put it in this portion anyway. Now do keep in mind, if you're putting these together, you're going to need to pay the action point unless you're doing something that gives you that action point or the ability to play this card at instant speed. So for example, if we go in here and go Storm Striders, as everybody knows and loves, Storm Striders here allows you to play your next wizard non-attack action card this turn as though it were an instant. Well, remember, this is a singular card. It has 2 effects and you can pay extra to have both effects happen, but it's a singular card. So Comet Storm Shock can be used off of Storm Striders. You can go Storm Striders, pay a resource, Comet Storm Shock, and pay 4. It would be a very expensive play, but you can go a nice little 4 for 6. There are also some other interesting effects that play into this as well that we should look at. So for example, a card like Reverberate has an on damage effect that says if Reverberate deals damage, you can banish a wizard non-attack action card from your hand with cost less than or equal to the damage dealt. So for example, if I play Reverberate and I deal 3 damage, my opponent says, no, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to take the 3. Well, I can go and get Comet Storm / Shock, and I can banish this card from my hand. And Reverberate, not Kindle, but Reverberate says I can play it as though it were an instant this turn, which means I have access to Comet Storm, that side of it, because I'm playing it at instant speed. My action point got consumed by Reverberate, and I can play Comet Storm. Now, I do believe as well that if I choose to, because I've already banished it and it met the cost requirement for, Reverberate's effect, if I deal 3 damage, I banish something that's cost 3 or less. I do believe I can then still meld this, paying 4 for the effect and getting both triggers. I do believe, though, you should be able to play this card down and then meld it for 4. If I'm wrong, leave a comment down below, Josh Scott. Tell us all the correct play here. Can I reverberate, naming after dealing 2 or more damage, naming Comet Storm and Shock, and then still play this for its meld effect, paying 4? My gut tells me yes, because of some previous functions within the game. Other things to talk about are cards like Sonic Boom. So for example, Sonic Boom says if it deals damage, you get to look at the top card of your deck. If, for example, the top card, by the way, is Comet Storm Shock, then we can banish that card, and if you do, you can play it at a reduced cost based on what you deal. So if Sonic Boom deals 2 damage, you can see off the top of the deck Comet Storm Shock. Sonic Boom allows you to banish that card, and then it reduces this cost by 2, which means that if you decide to play the Comet Storm side of things, it's an instant now, because you're playing this action as though it were an instant, thanks to the effect down here, and it is now free to play because the cost is then reduced down to 0. But, and this is very wisely pointed out, up here at the kind of quick fun facts, fast facts, if you will, the resource cost of playing a card with Meld starts at twice the base resource cost, then is modified by effects. So the way this functions with Sonic Boom is that it would get reduced when you pay the cost. So if you choose to meld this card, it would cost 4, and then the resource reduction from Sonic Boom would kick in. I believe this is what it means, and it would go down to 2. So your Comet Storm Shock, if you choose to meld it, would cost you 2 and is reduced from 4 to 2. Correct me again if I'm wrong. If I'm reading that into that correctly, let me know down in a comment below. But I'm pretty sure that's exactly what is spelled out right here. So that is what I am imparting to you, the knowledge that I give to you. So Sonic Boom should be able to find this off the top, which is a non-attack action card because it is a wizard action. These are all, by the way, I believe, considered action cards, as we see up here. Wait. Ah, yes, here we go. There it is. Melding an action instant split card means that you play it like an action empty stack and pay 1 action point. Okay, so this points to it being an action card, and it will be affected, I should say, by Sonic Boom and then pushed on over. Interestingly enough, the other question mark is how things like AMP affect this, because AMP is going to be a heavy keyword within this set, both for Rune Blades and for Wizards. So we're looking at Wizard examples because I love Wizard, and you're watching the video. You chose to do that. Congratulations to you. You're smart for doing so. AMP will affect the next point of, or the next thing, the next source of arcane damage. So AMP can fall on Shock and buff it, and then it would be done. AMP can also fall on Comet Storm if you respond to that layer and buff it and be done. Aether Wildfire is a little different, and this is a card that still exists in Classic Constructed. Ask any Kano player, we all know it and love it. It exists in Classic Constructed. It's the only reason the hero is viable currently, but maybe after this set, I don't know, might be without it. Nevertheless, this says if you deal damage, that damage spills over to everything else. Action card effects that deal arcane damage instead deal that much plus X, where X is what you deal. So these are action cards. They are considered action cards. And I believe both effects, because they are melded onto one card, are buffed. Just like Forked Lightning. Forked Lightning had the exact same style. Let's just pull it up. Forked Lightning, exact same style of card. Deal 2 arcane damage to target hero. Deal 2 arcane damage to target hero. Deal 5 arcane damage. Deal 1 arcane damage. So Aether Wildfire buffs both of these sources and pushes this to the moon, right? The same thing occurs for Comet Storm Shock and really any of these meld cards. The same thing can conceivably occur, and this is I'm just thinking about this off the top of my head. And let's see if I just find where is she? There she is. I believe the same thing should work if we talk about let's go Meld. Let's just throw this in there. And with a card like Flicker Wisp, which says if it was fused until end of turn, action card effects you control that deal arcane damage instead deal that much arcane damage plus 1. Action card effects that you control deal arcane damage. if both effects deal arcane damage, they will both get +1, meaning that Burn Up Shock here, which is a Runeblade lightning instant, it's a Runeblade action in a lightning instant, they apply these effects, deal 1 arcane damage to any target from the shock side of things. And then Burn Up says the next time an attack you control hits a hero, deal 4 arcane damage to them. Now, this is getting into the weeds a little bit. Deal 4 arcane damage to them, is that coming from the Burn Up or is that being sourced to the attack? I'm not sure, but anyway, it would be an action card effect that you control that deals arcane damage. That should apply to both of these. So Flicker Wisp is a really interesting card that might see some play because of this effect, because of the way that these cards function. Now, again, remember, these are one card with 2 effects. They will both receive that buff, hence the Forked Lightning change recently. And yes, you can pay individually into each of those for Arcane Barrier purposes. So these new split cards, very cool, kind of confusing, but hopefully this video helps you understand how they function a little bit better and just kind of makes sense when you pick the set up and play it in Limited at the Rosetta World Premiere, which I'm going to go to. So hey, if you're going to go to the Rosetta World Premiere, hang out with me. Let me know in a comment below so that we can all meet up and throw arcane damage at each other's faces. Also, thank you all so much for those of you who support on Patreon. It means the world to me. I couldn't do some of the things that I get to do without your support. It really does mean the absolute most. And if you want to support the channel, you can also just hit the button and make the number go just a little bit higher, because that is what we're all about. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.